Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Corrine. I hope you guys are having a great day and ready to continue on with our coloring series. So today this is going to be coloring 201. So last time was 101, which was using pencil crayons and Gamsol or mineral spirits or some sort of an uh, fluid surface that would help move the wax from your pencil crayons or your coloring pencils, whatever you prefer to call them. This week, for coloring 201, so this is just a step up, I'm going to be using water-based markers. Next class is going to be alcohol-based markers. So these are the three basics for coloring. I like to use water-based markers for my landscapes, things like this. I love to create these. They're so pretty. These are Northwood stamps. And you just get some really nice depth and texture, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And you can do this. I did this with 3 pens, 3 pen colors. Now, I have a variety of them out here, but I'm going to demo how I did this with just 3 pens and how you can add with only 3 colors, how you can create that. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to show you how to do is doing tip-to-tip marker colors. Okay. So how to create some really nice soft blends. Okay. When you are using a water-based marker, particularly these are Tombow, so these are water-based, so that's a dye-based ink. So they would smear if you put more water on them. They're great for using for watercolors and things like that. When you're using these markers, you'll get something here and it's called a colorless blender. So a lot of people think that it's the same as a blender marker with alcohol inks, but it is not. What it's actually meant to be used for is tip-to-tip coloring. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you can see where I've got some of the blends. So I've got red into pink, orange into yellow, green into kind of a tealy color, blue into purple. So I'm just doing kind of a rainbow along here. Then I'm going to show you how I'm doing that using the colorless blender, or the blender pen. Because they're watercolors, they don't actually blend. You have to pick them up to use them. But before I start any of that, I want to make sure that I'm telling you guys, because I think I forgot it yesterday with the pencil crayons, because they are when I filmed that one and when it got posted, I forgot to tell you guys. What I really recommend is making sure that you're swatching out your colors. So you can see here I've got the number and then the color. I've drawn it a little bit here because the colors that are on the caps do not necessarily always match. So this is, for example, 991. Well, that's actually this color right here, and it's quite, the cap is quite light. This one here, 990, you know, that one's not too bad. But when I start getting into, so 62, which is in my greens, which is over here. So this is kind of this greenish yellow color over there. So you want to make sure that you're swatching out your colors, because then you know what you're going to get. All right. So I'm going to do a demo of this tip to, so when you're using your colorless blender, your blender pen, okay, you want a scrap piece of paper because you need to take the color out of the fluid. So even though if you're looking at the tip, let's see here, get that to focus a little bit better. You notice that there's still some color left in that tip. But if I draw it on my paper here, no color is coming out. That's all I need to get it to, is to get it to the point where there's no color coming out. So I'm going to use this bright pink color. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tip of my blender. I'm just going to run it along, and I want to do it from the edge, okay, because I don't want to jab this into the tips, because I don't want to wreck the felt tips. Okay, this is kind of a brush tip type thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm just loading up from the pink onto my colorless blender. Then what I can do is I can take it to my paper and I can go like this. This is how I'm going to, and I'm just going to draw it down my paper like this. This is how I can get multiple shades of pink. Okay, draw it out, and there's not much left on my brush. Okay, so you can see it starts out more saturated, and then as I continue to color and the ink from what's in here, the watercolor, whatever the ink that's based in this is, starts to wash out. You get a thinner or a lighter color of ink. Okay, so I can show you that again. Let's draw that on. Draw my pen along the edge. Then I'm just going to take it from the edge and go back and forth. Okay, and I'm rolling my pen as I'm coloring it. That's also helping to move all of the color that's in there, moving it out. Okay. So just like last week when we were coloring, it's really important to remember that, so now I want to make sure that I've got all of that pink out because I'm going to move to a different color. Okay. Let me go to my happy birthday sign here. I did this in the inside of a card, and it turned out this is a stamp that I stamped with my amalgam ink, because I'm never sure how I'm going to, when I pre-stamp something, I'm never quite sure how I'm going to color it. So I like to use the amalgam ink because it can be used for water-based or alcohol-based inks. Very important. You have to make sure that you're using the right kind of ink with whatever medium you're using. So because these are water-based, I need to make sure that I'm using either an oil-based, so permanent, so ink. So I could use archival. I could use VersaFine Clair, let that dry, so a pigment ink, because it's got a solvent or glycerin in it, which will not react to water. Okay. But in order to keep it simple, I just like to use an amalgam ink because it allows me to use it with something that is either water-based or alcohol-based without smudging and without moving the outline of my color. Okay. Now you can feel on my paper here. So because we're using paper and we're adding liquid to it, it makes your paper a little bit fragile. So we have to be careful. We don't want to be drawing too much color on it. It starts to shed just a little bit. Okay. So I've now done my the D with the yellow and the orange. So before it, I had this really lovely, oh, that should have been, I buggered up the coloring, see? Should have been the T. I should have had the purple and the blue for the next one. But obviously I made a mistake there, so that's okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I got these colors on here. And on the lower one here, I'm starting with one color at the bottom and then going up to the color in the top. So because I'm starting at the bottom, I'm going to start with the red. So I'm just the same process. I'm just drawing the tip. Sorry, I'm going to move this. I'm going to tilt the camera here a little bit. It seems like it's a little out of frame here for you guys. I'm just drawing my blender across the tip of my felt pen. Okay, and I'm starting at the bottom, I'm going up, 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 and I can go here. Oops. And it's getting a little fainter as I get up to the top there. It's more saturated at the bottom here. I have to turn this around because there's still a little bit of color on my top. You can't quite see that off the edge there, but there was still a lot of that red. Reds and pinks are awfully difficult to get out of your felt tips here. Okay, but seeing how I'm going to be using the pink now. Take the pink, a little bit on there because I didn't leave myself a ton of room to come down. And I'm going to bring that down into the red so that the red starts to have a bit of a pink hue. I get a different kind of a peachy color. If you can see that there. I didn't do the best job of staying in lines, but that's okay. But you can see I just did a big streak here. A ton of color was left into that one. So because I've got the yellow and orange left to the side here, I don't know why I put the other colors, but I made a mistake there. I should have actually, instead of doing the green, should have done the green and blue here and then gone to purple and then gone out. So I had the wrong layout or wrong I don't even know the words that I'm looking for there. Okay, so that yellow is pretty saturated. I'm coming in with the yellow from the top, and I'm just going to start to drag it down. It's starting to fade there. It's pretty saturated at the top. And I'm not too worried about how deep the yellow is in color because this orange is going to go over it and it will cover in how far down I went with the yellow. So the yellow came down a little further than I meant it to, but that's okay. So now, because I don't have as much space, I'm just going to take a little bit of the orange and I'm just going to go up. And I'm going to fade that out just a bit into the yellow. Ooh, it's kind of dull. Usually this has gotten a little bit more juicy since when I started. But that is basically the practice. So you want to practice with these. You'll get better as you start to draw it down and draw it up, bringing your colors together. So you can see, not counting the two that I just did because I oversaturated my pen, but you can see in all of these areas, sorry, I'm going to try and get it a little closer, as I'm going through the center of, so I brought the yellow down and then I brought, go the other way, green, there we go. And I brought the orange up and then it kind of lightens to an almost white. So I've got the blue here, and then I've got the green or the teal coming up, but it's a very light where the two match, purple and blue, and then it lightens in the center. So that's the effect that we're going with. So there is some lighting and some blending of the colors. This got really well saturated. So you can also do it very well saturated. If you want it in a lighter tone, so for example, you can see here on this H, I've got the red from the top where it lightens out right here, but it's quite saturated at the top here. And then as I come down or come from the pink at the bottom of the two stumps on the H and draw it up, it gets fainter and whiter, but the two colors start to blend and merge. Okay, so you also want to make sure that you're choosing colors. Like it's not necessarily a good idea to do your purple with your orange because you'll end up with a brown in this area here. Yeah. So try that out here just to show you. So if I start with the orange, and I can see here where it's starting to fade out, starting to lessen. Still a little bit of pigment coming off of the pen, but it is lessening. And I'm going to turn this around just so that I can draw it down rather than having to go up. I don't know how much I put on purple. Coming into the orange and over the orange. So I am getting a blending, but it is actually, if I were to do that any deeper in color, you can see here where the orange going into the purple, this area here starts to look a little brown. Well, that's not always going to be the most attractive color, unless that's what you're looking for, which is fine. But you want to be careful of how your colors blend together. You want to keep that in mind, which is why I did colors of the rainbow that would go next to each other, right? So blue and yellow will always give you a green. So as you merge those together, that's going to give you a nice green color. So the yellow will blend seamlessly into the blue and you'll get a variety of shades. Same thing as a blue into a red. You'll get blue, then into spectrum of purples, like indigos, purples, etc., and then into the pinks and reds. And then from red into yellow, you'll get reds that'll start to transition into oranges that will then go into the yellows. Same thing. Okay. So this technique can be done with, like I said, any water-based marker. So I can, these are water-based markers, Crayola markers, anything that is water-based, this technique can be done. Okay. So I'm just going to put these to the side. I'm going to keep this as my marker sheet, but I want to show you how to create some depth and dimension. This is this cute little giraffe that I was coloring. And you can see that I've added a little bit of shading and shadow to his face and to his horns here and things like that. So I'm going to do the same thing. The color that I'm going to use is this one here, which is 991. These don't have, what's the word for it? They don't have names on them, but this is the shade that I'm going to be using. And it's actually the same shade that I used on him in the first place, but you can see how deep and toned it gets here compared to here. Well, how do we do that? Especially on paper, because it's very, very delicate paper. This is, pretty sure it's Neenah Classic Crest Solar White paper. So it's just 80 pound. So it's not I mean, it's a good quality cardstock, but it's not anything super fancy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and I'm going to lay down a layer of color for the areas of where I want this kind of orangey color to be. So I'm just going to lay down some color here. And he's got this kind of orange here. So my friend, these are her stamps. If you saw last week's or the last video that I did with the coloring, it was sharks. Next week or the next video with the alcohol markers is going to be a dragon, and she has these dies to cut it out, which is why I've got them on this crazy piece of paper. But they're just adorable. So I want to finish coloring them, and then I'm going to take them out and die cut them and make a card with them. But okay, so now I've laid down my first layer. Okay, so the nice thing about using water-based markers or dye-based markers like this, I can actually use them in coloring books and when I'm doing mandalas and things like that without them super saturating. I mean, this one did saturate through a little bit, but not bad considering how much ink and everything that I used on this. But so you can use these in color books from like a mandala one or ones that you get from the dollar store or whatever. You can use these and pencil crayons, but you can't use the Gamsol from pencil crayons on your on the fibers of your coloring books. And alcohol inks will for sure, in general, fully saturate through a coloring book. So it's you know, this is a nice treat to be able to have this. So now, because I'm playing on paper, I don't want to drag my marker along my paper again, because what's going to happen is it's going to start to pill because I'm putting too much water and ink into it. So it loosens the fibers of the paper, and then I'm going to end up with a bally mess. And possibly even if I go deep enough, I'll actually work right through the paper. I don't want to do that. So how do you add this depth and dimension then, Corinne? Good question. So I'm going to take my marker. Okay, so you can see it's a felt tip. So this is actually made out of felt. This one's similar to a brush tip, but it's actually made out of felt. So I'm just going to take the tip and I'm just going to go along and I'm going to dab. So I've allowed my paper, the areas that I had colored previously, I've allowed them to dry a little bit. Okay, for that first layer of color to saturate the paper. And now, just like I did with the sharks that I colored the last time, I'm following where there is some areas, like, so this stamp that's delineated right here, that, you know, that's going to be a hollow. So I want to make sure that I'm adding some extra color there into his ear. So I'm just going to turn my paper around and I'm going to do the other side of his other ear. And I'm just dabbing. Okay, I don't want to drag it if I can help it. So I'm just dabbing quickly up and down, up and down, up and down, touching the tip and a little bit of the barrel or a little further up than the tip. Just a little bit, creating a shape. So already you can start to see that it looks like there's a shadow on the inside of his ear. Right? Well, that's what I want to do. Now I want to make his horns look a little rounder. So where would, if the sun was coming directly down on here, where would I have shadows? Well, I would have shadows along this side here. Okay. And again, I'm just dabbing. Dab, 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 dab. And I'm going to go like this because the shadow would be on this side. Make that a little rounder. So, and I'm going to go along the edge of this horn or whatever this, I have no idea what this thing is called on a giraffe, but. Okay. I'll pull that up for you to see. So you can see it's a little lighter from the top coming down. Okay. We're starting to create base and depth here. Now, under his chin here, there would also be some shadow coming down. So I want to dab, 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 dab. And I'm going to do along this because he would have along the edges, there would be light, but right down the center, we're going to have a little bit of depth there. So we're going to add, oh, pardon me, a little bit of color there, not a ton, just enough. Okay, and then over his face, I want to make sure that that's got some depth and dimension and detail here. As well around his eyes, because you see he's got these eyebrows, right? So the stamp has told us he's going to have some depth around his eyes. So I'm going to darken that in. And again, I'm just doing it by dabbing. Dab, 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 dab. Okay. So now the front of his face, this part here looks like it's coming a little bit more towards the camera where I've got his eyes there. So now my ears area here have dried a little bit, so I can go back. Let's say I want to make that even darker. So I want to add some shadow right there. Make that area even darker. Okay. I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the same on this side. Dab, 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 dab. Look at that. His ears look almost concave now. This is a 2D image that we're trying to make a little more 3D. Obviously, it's still going to be 2D. It's on a piece of paper, so we're not going to get like perfection, but we're not expecting perfection. We're just looking to make these things look cute, add some special detail to them. So now I'm just adding a little bit more shaded and shadowed area to the horns. So if the sun is coming this way, the lightest areas would be here and here. So the darkest areas would be in here, in this area. Okay. Also going to do some more over his eyes. That's pretty cute, actually. I just forget how much I love coloring. Just get so it's me in the Zen zone. Okay, look at how cute this guy is. But you can see here we've got more detail, starting to look a little 3D, but look at the depth and dimension on his ears there. They look concave, like they've curved inwards, right? So cool. Okay, let's do his face here. So 20. So now I'm going to refer to my color chart. Took the time to make the color chart, so why don't I use the color chart? So this one, I noticed this one's a little dark for me, so I think I'm going to use 990 and we'll try that out and see what happens. So okay, so again, I'm going to lay down my first layer of color, And this one I can just draw along, that's fine. It doesn't have to be anything. I don't want to try and agitate the paper too much because again, I'm going to come back in and add a lot of ink and water and color to this. So I want to be as gentle on the paper as possible. All right. So we're going to let that dry a little bit. And I don't think I have a pink out for his tongue. I'm going to have to come back and do that. I'll have to find my pink for that. Okay, so now on this particular image, okay, I don't know if you can see them here, so, but he's got what I'm assuming are some sort of a nostril here. So the stamp has pointed out that right in this area here is where you want to have some shadow. You want to have some shadowing in here, and then along the front. So he's got this nice T going across his lip, right? So across the front here and along here. That's where we're going to be able to begin adding a roundish and a popping of color. Okay, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to darken this area in here. It's basically following kind of the line. Doesn't have to be exactly the line, but I want that area to be darker. And even though I'm not bringing that up to the camera, you can see, look at how dark that has gotten there. And so I'm just dabbing. Dab, 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 dab. Dab, 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 dab. I want to keep it kind of concave so that it looks like it is that area. And I'll bring that up so that you can see. So now I want to go along the front of his nose, or whatever this thing is here, whatever they're calling this T junction. Okay. Look how much difference that just made. Just adding that little bit there. Okay. So now I'm going to dab along here. Dab, 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 dab. And I'm gonna bring it out just a little bit from here. We can add our own kind of dimensions to this. Okay. Look at that. Ooh, it's adorable already. So, and it is coming through the paper a little bit, but not bad. Now I want to come in and I want to again make this a little bit deeper where his cheeks or his nostrils or whatever this is supposed to be. Okay, so this particular layer where I'm dabbing here, I want to keep that really close to where the stamp was. So I'm going to add this color here, highlight where that black line was, and just deepen it. And I'm going to do the same thing, dabbing along where this line is here. I want to stay close to the line. I'm actually just going just under it, but I want to darken it and continue to allow the second layer of color that I added down. That's going to be our first layer of shading, and this is the second. Oh goodness, that's so cute. He's so cute. There we go. Look at that. He's just adorable. All right, so I'm going to put that one aside and I'm going to show you how to do this landscape. And now I said that I was going to use 3 colors. So I want to show you how to do this with 3 colors. You can add more if you have them, which is great. But if you don't, here's how you make that happen. Okay, so I'm going to start with 990. That's going to be my kind of brownish color. And then for the green, I want to do, let me see, the blue, I'm going to do 451. So this is a very light blue, so it's going to be this blue here. And then the green that I'm going to do is 243, which is, I think, this one. Yes. So these are going to be these are going to be the 3 colors that I'm going to start with, okay? And I'll show you how you can add depth and dimension, and then I can bring in a couple of the other colors. But I want to start with this to start with. Okay. So now Northwood Stamps actually has like guides, like pictures that they've done, so you can kind of copy along with it and things like that if you want. I'm gonna go along here and I'm just gonna add some color. So again, I'm adding my first layer of color. I'll hold this up in a second here. Okay, one, some grass over here. And make that a boulder. You can see back here, you guys might not be able to see it, but because I've seen and I've colored this a few times, so I know that there's grass back in this area here. And some grass here. Observant in there. And I'm going to come through and do a few of the leaves. The leaves are in general green, so it hits the fall. Okay, so let's do these ones the same, I guess. I'm going to show you how to do this with the 3, and then I'll add some more details and whatever, but and this is going to be the same tree, so it's probably basically the same. Okay, so this is going to be where my starting point is. Okay, so it's a lot of green, it's a lot of the same shade of green, and it's a very light green. So green, what are you going to do with this? Well, I want to darken it up. So you can see in some of the areas they've got like there's this patch here. Looks like it needs to be darkened. Okay, there's some grass that's coming up here. I can also go over the whole thing again to make it a deeper shade of green. And again, what I want to do is I'm tapping, okay, because I've laid down my first layer of color. So the paper has absorbed that, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to be pulling on the paper, because then it will start to ball on me, which again, I don't want. I want to make sure that my paper is going to be okay. So you start to get pretty good at, like this is a pretty large area, so I can dab away and get pretty good at moving it pretty quickly, blah, blah, blah. Lane from Seinfeld would say, yada, yada, yada. Yes, that's your clue that I watch too much TV. Okay, so if you look at this here, okay, this is a very blue shade of green. It's got a lot of blue in it, but this one is now a little bit darker than this side over here. And I'm going to keep that back grass the lighter color. Okay, some of this up here I want to be darker because it's in the foreground. So I'm going to be dabbing it. Dab, 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 dab. Dab, 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 dab. And I want to come over here. This is still maybe too wet. Oh, that's good. Okay. come in here and all of these shady areas I want to make darker. So I'm dabbing again. I'm adding shade. I'm adding the highlight. This is where the shadow from the tree would fall. Okay. The stamp shows me right here, there's some crosshatch marks. So that's a fold of a rock or a hill or a hillock or whatever you want to call it, where it kind of rolls underneath the grass here. So I want to make sure that particular area has more depth. So I'm adding color. Color in here. That's my color one here. And don't worry about adding too much color, feeling like it's kind of standing out. Once you get your whole picture together, you know, don't panic about anything until you're actually completed. A lot of this will soften out as it dries. It looks harsh, but in the grand scheme of things, it actually just adds that extra bit of dimension. Okay? I'm not sure if you can start to see. You can see now I'm starting to highlight some of these hills, make it look like there's a dimension to it versus just coloring. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and then I'm going to put down my green for a bit, and I'm going to bring in some of the other colors, which will give this layer of color that I've added, it will give it some time to dry, because I can put down my thumb, I can actually feel it on my finger here. Okay. So I'm going to give that some time to dry. And I'm going to start in with the brown. Okay. Now the brown is going to be obviously for the rocks. A little bit of the ground here. These leaves that are by the edge of the water that might be like cattails or by something like that. So we'll put a little bit of brown there. And we've got some ground in the underneath of a rock here. Some of that. Got these really big tree branches. I'm going to follow here. So the nice thing about having this slightly sharper point on this is that it does make it a little bit easier to follow. It's going to be brown here. So, and because I've added a little bit of green on some of these rocks here, I can actually color my brown on top, and it adds just that different layer of color to the green or brown, whichever one is the more dominant color in there, like depending on how much depth I decide I want to add to it. So looks like that's going to be in the rock there. And we've got this nice big tree here. Nice thing about the stamping on this particular image, and I have several of them from Northwoods because I really love the images. This is again one of those things, much like the Lavinia stamps that I love to do. This was another one that I thought I could never do, and then I watched a video because you know that's what I do. I love to watch the videos, and it was Stacy from scrapbookingmadesimple.com, and she did this wonderful tutorial on Tombow markers and how to color using these items. Now her tutorial, I believe, was 2 hours. I'm hoping not to keep you guys here for that long. But yeah, so I'm just, and what I learned was how to create and use these beautiful images, but how to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of dimension. It doesn't have to be a ton of it. Okay. All right, so now you're starting to see my scene is starting to flesh out a little bit, but I still want more. So I started with my brown over here. So that's where I'm going to go first. Well, this side is starting to dry, right? And I'm going to go in where all of these crosshatch marks are, because that delineates or designates this is a shadow area. So this is an area that is either not getting sun or is dirty or is whatever, but the stamp, you want to utilize the stamp to help you with that. Where am I being told to put my shadow? Okay, some of it you can even see here. Let's see if I can get that to you there. Some of this here you can even see goes out into the water, right? So this area here, because under the water, especially if it's a crystal clear babbling brook, as this looks to be, right, you would still see some of the shadow. You'd still see some of the rocks. There'll be some blue on top of it, but you'd still see some of the rocks. So that's what I want to make sure that I have, is that a little bit of that shadow is also coming out from there. So the reason why I'm showing you how to do this with just 3 markers rather than using the whole set or what I've got and things like that is because I want you to know you don't have to invest in full sets. There are ways to do this without having to have every single thing that's out there, right? There's, you know, we all get lost in full set syndrome. I'm certainly culpable in that as well. Um, I do, when I find something that I like to have all of it, but I don't need to have all of it. There is a way to do this without having to have every single thing that comes along. And it's a good way to try something before investing. Like if you decide that this is the way that you like to color and you want to create images like this or blah, 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 then okay, go ahead and invest. But start with one set that has a few of the lighter colors, because you can always, right? Like it's so much easier to color with this lighter brown like this than it is with a purple, because this goes on fully saturated. It's very difficult to add more layers to this. Not that you can't, but it's more difficult because it's already there in your shading, right? You've already got a deep dark color. So you have to add more from there. Instead of coming from something that is lighter, like the brown that I'm currently using, and adding the depths and shadows and highlights just by adding more tone to it or being able to cover up and go over it. So I recommend starting small if you want. You don't have to invest in every little thing. A lot of my friends think that have said that I showed them the best one last, but they had invested in all of these things first. And I was like, well, the reason why I was showing you that is so that you knew you could do this. So pencil crayons, that's why I started with pencil crayons or coloring crayons, coloring pencils first, so that you could try the least expensive item first. First and foremost is try that out, see if you liked it, because you don't. Maybe that's not for you, and that's fine. Everybody is going to be different in what they like and what they don't. So pencil crayons or coloring pencils, whichever ones you call them, are obviously the least expensive way to get started with coloring. You can add other things as well, but the best way, and then moving on to water-based markers, because you can do this with Crayolas from the dollar store, for goodness sakes, right? Like it doesn't need to be an artist marker. That's what these are. These are an artist quality marker, Tombows. But Michaels has their Artist Loft markers, dye-based ones. They work just as fine, just as well. And the most expensive, because it's such a large investment, would be alcohol markers, which is why that's the next one that we're going to learn. We're going to learn it, and you can see how to use them before you go and invest, before you buy a bunch of different things, try them out, see how you like them. I never thought that I would actually get into alcohol markers. And then I found some that work like a darn and make it easy to do the blending and all of that kind of thing. So because of that, I was like, okay, well, okay, this might be for me. Might be. So, and I'm just continuing to come along here and add in my shadows and highlights where it's telling me they belong. Following the stamp. So, I don't know if you can see here on this tree, you can see here that where the dark hatch marks are. So I'm going to add some depth and dimension. But look at what's happening with, I've taken this 2D image just by adding the extra brown to the rocks. Now the rocks are starting to come alive here, right? Because this tree is in the front though, or in the foreground, I guess it's not in the front, but in the foreground of my image, I do want this tree to stand out. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the brown. And I'm still just pouncing. It looks like I'm drawing it, but I'm not. I'm dipping, just dipping my pen up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Pen, marker, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna add some more brown down here. Okay, that's good for the brown. So I'm gonna let that sit. I'm actually gonna go back in with my green here for a little bit. And then I'm gonna bring in my blue. Get going with the blue. Bring in beautiful shades. I don't know why I'm singing. Sorry about that. So basically what I've decided here is I've decided that these are, so you see there's a lot of rocks and everything here, but this is also, you know, like this grass is going to come, it's kind of covering the rolling hills as it's coming up to the rocks and the river. So, and you can see, despite the fact that this is quite a bright green, like this light green that's very bluish in color, it's starting to deepen in some of these areas. So I'm getting 2, 3, 4, depending on how many layers of green I decide to put down on top of each one, I'm getting 4 and 5 of the same tone, but different shades, right? Darkest to lightest or lightest to darkest, however you want to think about that. Which is why I don't need 47 markers. Not that I don't have 47 markers, but I don't need them if I don't want to invest in those. I can start small. These leaves to be standing out just a little bit from the grass that's in the back there. Couple more leaves that I missed the first time around. Okay. So I'll bring that up closer to the camera now. You can see these are starting to look more hilly. Same thing with in the water here. You can start to see these rocks. So now I'm going to take my blue. And I know, okay, so I'm going to bring the blue along here. And everywhere where there's kind of this shadow area, I want to leave a little bit of white in the water. And the reason why I'm leaving the white in the water is because water sparkles. So I'm going to add the shade here. So the blue is coming in. there are a couple of areas that I want to keep just a little lighter. I don't want to color every single thing. Seems strange, but it works and it makes it look like it's rippling. So because this is the first layer, I can bring this in and kind of drag it across. I don't have to be pouncing right now because it's the first layer. So I'm allowed to bring, well, I mean, I'm allowed to do whatever the heck I want, but okay, so that's going to be the first layer of color for the blue. But can you see how I've left a few areas of white? I want that to be the lightest place because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to start pouncing. I want this area, any place where there's shading, I want that to be darker. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to keep dragging, dragging. So you're probably asking about these pine trees in the back. I'm going to use my other green for those because I've shown you here how you can get so many different tones out of just one pen. So to save you guys a little bit of time and not having to sit here for hours and hours and hours while I try and add more and more color and tone to that particular tree, I'm actually just I'm gonna use a different green because I have invested in a few of these colors. So I have them at my disposal, so I'll use them. But I really do recommend trying things out before you go and go whole hog in this, you know, whether it's ink pads, markers, paper, tools, dyes, you know, try it out and see if there's a friend that you can borrow them from, because maybe it doesn't fit your crafting style, because that takes a long time to learn what your crafting style is, and it's an expensive hobby, you know, like it really can be. There's a lot to invest in, and there are places, as I've shared in other videos, there are places where I like to invest my money, and then there are places where it's like I'll go the inexpensive route, which is often, you know, like knockoff stamps and dies, those kind of things. But when it comes to materials, like these are artist quality, you know. My paper is always a really good paper. I use good quality inks, good quality adhesive. Those are the things that I use all the time. I might use a die or a stamp, you know, I might use it 10 or 12 times, and then that's as much as I'm going to use it. So it's hard for me to justify using that into my budget. But these kind of things, they never go bad, they never go away. Same thing with the die and stamp too. But I don't need to have every single thing out of those then. Yeah. So I recommend trying them out. Don't invest in everything until you actually know. Well, I mean, you don't even have to invest in everything ever, but wait and see if it's something that you actually like. I made that mistake, and I invested and spent a lot of money on things that turns out is not my crafting style. Find out what your crafting style is. There's so many people who can create really beautiful things, but and you will too, but it may not be your style. And then I spent a lot of time, I've talked about this in a previous video, I spent a lot of time feeling a bit like a failure because I couldn't create like my friends were creating. Turns out I didn't need to, because I have my own style, and what I create is just as beautiful. It's just different. It's my style, not their style. And there's nothing wrong with that. So that took me probably about 5 minutes, let's say. But look at that water. See, so I've got the white. I left a little bit of white, and then I've got the first layer of color, and then I dabbed and I added more color to add depth and dimension to my river. because if you can see all the rocks, that means then that there's going to be multiple layers in that river. Okay, check out the green on my rolling hills. So I can add a little bit more green over here. This is a little drier now, so I'm just going to add a little bit more green along all of the areas here where this would be delineating that it's a boulder or a cut line or a rolling hill. Add a little bit more green there. And on the back here. And then I want a little bit here. So that looks like a pretty harsh line, but it's actually not. It will absorb into the paper. So I don't need to worry about that per se. And come back in with my brown. So far again, these are the three colors that I've used: a brown, a green, a light green, and a blue. And I've just added my depth and dimension just using those by just dabbing. Okay. So what's interesting is on this tree, it's very fine detail, so it probably won't show on the camera, but there are some crosshatch marks here that add like where knots of a tree would be. So I can add a little bit of depth and dimension. So I'm just adding the color right there, which will help add just a little bit of dimension. Let's catch that one shadowed under there. Oh my, this is really popping off of there. I like it. Good. Okay, I'm gonna go back in with one more layer on my blue. So, and again, I can tell where I'm supposed to be adding these highlights because the stamp is telling me that's where these highlights or these depths, the shadows, the color play goes. I don't have to worry about it or stress about it too much. And if I didn't want to follow what the stamp was saying, or if I had a stamp that didn't tell me, because there are some out there, like the little cutie pie stamps, like the giraffe that we were coloring. What I want you to do is practice just setting where is my light source. So for example, if I was playing with the little giraffe here, I would want to say, okay, well, if he was standing like this, his light would be coming directly down at him this way. So that means the light is shining this way. Now, if it was full on, kind of like the light is right now, it could be coming here. So this would be the lightest area on his face. But I decided he was standing in the sunlight, so the sun is going to be coming this way. So I made the top parts of his ears, his horns, his nose here, those are going to be the lightest parts. You just have to imagine and just pick the place where your light source is going to be. That's what you want to practice. Okay. I think I'm really happy with that background there. Okay. So now just to add a little bit of color and kind of move it along here, I'm just going to come in with this other green to catch this kind of, I don't know, I'm assuming this is supposed to be a spruce tree back here. And again, because this is my first layer of color, I can drag my pen or my marker across my paper without damaging my paper. It's fine. It's not going to hurt it too badly. Put a little bit of green over here. This is another one. And I'm going to count this, which is kind of a bush kind of thing, I think. I don't know. I'm going to do the same with that one. Okay, so I've now introduced another color, but it's beginning to complete the picture here. So as soon as this, I'm just going to give this a moment to dry, and then I'm going to darken up these ones because I'm going to keep this bush, which has these weird leaves that don't seem to be leaves. That's a little different, so I'm going to keep those, that kind of lighter color, and then I'm going to deepen these out a little bit. Out in here. Both places where I didn't color all the way to the edge while I'm just letting my paper saturate a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to come in and I'm going to deepen in the green of this spruce tree, pine tree, spruce tree, whatever you want to call it, and a little bit just by dabbing. Now I've added my first layer of color, so I don't want to be dragging my marker on it, so it needs to be dabbed. Otherwise, I'll start to pull and pill my paper, which I don't want to do. I'm almost at the end here, so I don't want to wreck it. That'd be just my luck. Okay, so that's one. So I'm just going to leave this green over here. I don't think I'm going to there. So I'm just going to bring that around. It's starting to deepen. I want to hit this tree here, the one that's central. I want to get that one a little bit darker just to kind of pop it off as well, the same way that I've done here. So I don't know if you can start to see where some of the knots are on this tree. There's a couple like right here, a couple right there, right there. So it's kind of nice to have it just a little darker in a few areas. And I have no idea how long I've been recording here, so I'm hoping I'm just about in at the home stretch here, folks. So just kind of hang on with me here. I'm just about done. So, and although it doesn't seem like we're adding a lot of color, a lot of water, you can start to see my paper is being quite warped here. Okay, so again, that's why I want to make sure I'm dabbing. I'm not pulling. Very important to just dab, just dab, just dab. Okay. I'm really happy with that. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take this kind of this bluish highlight blue color, and I'm going to go around the edge and color in this, I don't know, the edge of the stamp. This actually was a part of the stamp. This is sometimes where I think I'm crazy. I should have done this probably first. In my luck to just go outside the line and then be like, oh gosh darn. Okay. So this is the last, well, not quite the last, but one of the finishing touches here is to finish off the frame it. There we go. It's quite nicely. The reason why I'm not cutting it off just around the square is because I actually have a sentiment that I'm going to stamp down here. And the sentiment that I'm going to stamp is where? I just had it here. Had it put aside, so I would have it where it was. Ah, there it is. Okay. Alrighty. So the stamp that I want to use is this one that says "A wish is the start of a dream," which I think is a really lovely sentiment. A nice general one. Oh, I'm opening that right up the side. Okay. So it's this sentiment here. So there's some really lovely ones on here. Follow your heart. Remember the good times, which is what I did on the last one that I did. but I want to do this. A wish is the start of a dream, but it's too big to fit on here. So I'm actually going to I'm going to do this, but I'm going to commit surgery on my stamp. Nobody panic. It will still stamp just fine. Okay, so a wish is the start. That's what I want to be on the top line. So I'm going to stretch my stamp here just a little bit, and I'm going to cut that off. So a wish is a start. And I'm going to line that up on my stamp. Sorry, I think I might be out of frame there. Okay, wish is a start. And I'm just lining it up on the lines on my block here. And then I'm going to bring this up of a dream. And I'm just eyeballing it. I don't, this is handmade, so I don't need it to be perfect. But I do want it to kind of match up a little bit so that it makes a nice central statement. And then I want to push that in. I've never used it before, so I'm kind of running my fingers over the stamp. Watch my Stamping 101 video if you want to know why I'm doing that. I'm going to use, because I finished my coloring, I want to use my VersaFine Clair in Nocturne, because it's going to give me a nice crisp image. I want to make sure that everything is glistening on my stamp. I'm going to pull out my little stamping pressurized mat here. It's almost like a mouse pad, which gives my stamp something to bite into. I'll brush my ink here just a little bit. Then I'm going to bring that over, and I'm going to put my head up just a little bit here and go down. I'm just going to hold that for a moment, give it time for the ink to transfer from my stamp onto my paper, and I'm going to lift. So the wish is the start of a dream, which is lovely. Okay. I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to wave this a little bit, let the ink dry a little before I go and put it on the card. So all I've done, this is a 4¼ by 5.5 inch card. It's so standard A2 size, and I'm going to put it onto there. And then I've got my sentiment. It's all done. So I'm going to glue that down, and then I'm going to show you the final step. I promise it is the final step. So the glue that I'm using here is Bearly Art Glue. It's a wonderful art product. Again, art quality adhesive. Make sure my card opens this way. Yes, it does. Okay, and now I'm going to stick it down roughly centered. I want to try and get it as close to centered as I can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, it's, handmade. It's not Hallmark. I've got a little bit of seepage. I'm going to squish that off there. And yeah, it's pretty straight actually. Okay, so I'm going to put that down. A bit of a rub. So my card is actually still wet. I can feel how damp my card is here. I'm sorry, I'm just putting the pin back in my adhesive, or closes up. I didn't want it to close up on me. Okay, so the final step is I am going to now take some stickles, or the one that I'm going to use, because I always find it's the easiest here, is some glitter drops from Nuvo. This is the White Blizzard. So it's clear with a little bit of glitter in it. And I'm just going to go along and just going to squeeze it. There we go. And I'm just going to kind of draw it a little back and forth like this, creating a little bit of lines. I don't want to color in the whole thing. I know it looks like I'm coloring the whole thing, but I'm actually just dragging it along just a little bit here. And I don't know if the glitter is going to show on the, oh yeah, see? So now my water looks like it has depth, dimension, and the river, which is the main focal point of the card, is what is standing out. That was my intention. So the trees are there, gives you the overall general, what's the word I'm looking for? Gives you the overall general gist of the scene, but the river is what's important in there, right? So it's got all that depth and dimension. Now it's going to have a little bit of gloss, a little bit of shine to it. So what I love about these cards is that they're really beautiful to give to men. They're wonderful masculine cards. I mean, you can give them to women as well, but they're beautiful masculine cards without having a ton of glitter or whatever. I mean, this would still be a man going to, you know, a lake or a cabin. He's going to know what this is. This is like the setting sun, the morning sun, right? It's not like sparkle in your face. It's sparkle where it's supposed to be because the sun glitters off of the light. So, or off of the water, I mean. So these are our cards. This is coloring with water-based markers. I hope you enjoyed the class. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't, tell your friends. And again, if you're a new subscriber as well, welcome. I hope you've been enjoying my videos, and I look forward to seeing you guys next. Don't forget, the next video will be coloring 301, which means then we're going to be playing with alcohol ink markers. I hope to see you there. Have a great day, guys.